Okay, welcome back. We're going to be going into part 2 of this month's flat lay challenge, and that is how to create drop shadows in Canva. Okay, so firstly, why would you want to create a drop shadow in Canva? Firstly, what is a drop shadow? So a drop shadow is a shadow that falls behind an object. Like you would see in real life, it will have a shadow. Now, this gives your objects depth. It helps make your designs, your flat lay designs, look more realistic, as they would in real life, because objects pretty much cast shadows in real life, and that's what helps add that extra bit of character and realism to your flat lays. So far, all the flat lays we've done haven't had shadows. This one, you can see I have added shadows to that. That's why it looks probably a bit different to the one that you may have created, the one that we created just now. These all have shadows added to them. All the items, the PNG objects that you will have in the challenge packs that come with the challenges, they have a very basic drop shadow around them, just around the whole edge. This is just to automatically give your object a little bit of depth if you don't know how to use proper drop shadows on your items. So also, if you move those objects at any angle, the shadow will be the same right around. Whereas with the drop shadow, the shadow will fall on the opposite side to where the light is. So I just want to explain a little bit about how lighting works, because you need that to understand how shadows work. So the best way to understand and practice how shadows work is to observe them in real life, okay? In a situation where there's light, dark. So your shadow is always on the opposite side to your light. So if we look at this light bulb here, your light is here, your shadow will fall on that side of the object. And example B, if your light is behind the object, the shadow will fall here in front of the object. So with the flat lays we create, to make them look more realistic, we imagine that the light is behind, it's not behind, sorry, it's behind the objects but in front of the viewer. So all the shadows in the flat lays that you create, to best bring the viewer into the design, is to place your shadows at the bottom section of all your objects, because it'll help the viewer to actually feel like they are in your scene, rather than placing them at other strange objects. If you're sitting at your desk and there's a light in front of you, all the shadows of any items on your desk will fall in front of those objects towards you. So the first step is to understand how lighting works and how shadows respond to light. And the best way to do that, like I've said, is observe real life objects and situations, and just become aware of shadows in your daily doings, as you're going around, walking, sitting at your desk, going out to the shops. Just become aware of shadows and how they look. You'll sometimes see double shadows if there's two lights. That is possible to create in Canva, but it's a bit more complicated, so we won't be going into that. I just want to get to the shadows part in my notes. So if you put shadows in your designs in the wrong places, your design's going to look strange. You won't probably be able to put your finger on why it looks strange, but 9 times out of 10, it's probably the shadows. That's the problem you'll have if you're downloading a bunch of free PNGs from a free website. All those transparent PNGs would have been created by different people, and they will either have no shadows, or they will have shadows in different places to each other, or they'll have highlights in different places to each other. So when you put them on your page and you move them around, the shadows are not going to work together to create a coherent, realistic looking image. So that's the beauty of the packs that I create, is that they are put together in such a way that you can use those items together and they look like they're supposed to go together. They're all taken from the same angle, the lighting is the same, the lighting is even, and when you use objects from different packs together even, your design will still look coherent and like those objects are meant to be together. Okay, so let's get going on to creating shadows. Okay, as you can see, I've already created these as sample images, but I'm going to create some more. So let's go to uploads. It's actually quite simple. So let's start with, I'm going to start with a really simple object. I'm going to start with this pot. Okay, so it's a circular object. The first thing you do is bring your object through onto your page. The next thing you do is copy that object. So that will be your main top object. This object is going to become your shadow. So in order to make a shadow, the first thing we do is go to our filter settings. Let's just move it here so you can see it changing. So we go to our filter settings and we take our brightness right down to -100. Okay, we do the same with our contrast. We take it right down. Saturation, same thing. So, and then blur, we take it right up. So your contrast, you can adjust darker and lighter depending on your background. We'll get back to that just now. I'm going to make this a little bit darker so that we don't pick up the detail in there. So we have that blurred object. Now to turn that into a more realistic looking shadow, we just use our transparency tool and we lighten it to whatever we want it to be. If you're using a light background, your drop shadow needs to be lighter. If you're using a dark background like that, it needs to be fairly dark. So you just place your original object on top of it. So you can adjust where that shadow sits depending on where you want your light source. So if you decide your light source is coming from here, you can move your object over there. So all your objects will have the shadow on that side. If you decide you want it to come from the top, then it can come from the top. Also bear in mind that the height of your shadow, how much of it appears underneath your main object, will be relevant to the height of that object. So a piece of paper on your page will have a very small shadow around it, a very close shadow because it sits right on the desktop, whereas a tall plant will have a much longer shadow. So that's another thing to bear in mind when you are creating your drop shadows. So here we've used a dark background. So I'm just going to show you how to adjust your shadow with a dark background. So here, if your shadow is light, you can only barely see it. So all you do is adjust your transparency to make that shadow darker on your dark background. If you have a solid black background, you can just make that as dark as possible. If you find it's still not dark enough, you can duplicate that shadow so you actually have two of those shadows on top of each other to make it darker and still remain transparent. Let's just remove this background. Alright, so ideally you want to group those two together so they work as one object once you have your shadow where you want it. Now when you're creating these shadows on your images for a flat lay, I would suggest creating them all on a separate page to your design. Sometimes it's difficult to actually create drop shadows in the middle of your design, your layout process. Create them first and then copy them through onto the page that you are creating your flat lay on. Or if you're using the paid version of Canva, you can actually re-export them as transparent PNGs and upload them again with their drop shadows on. It's up to you how you want to use that. But at the end of the day, that's how you create a drop shadow in Canva, and it's really very simple and will just add a complete different dimension to your designs and make them look a lot more realistic. And that's that. What I wanted to do quickly is I don't normally punt my products, but I would like to just let you know that I do have an online shop on Creative Market and I sell bundles of transparent PNG images. Like I mentioned earlier, they all work together. So, and they're really reasonably priced. So the price per image works out to less than 50 cents, American cents. So it works out half the price of the images that you would pay for on Canva if you're using Canva and you're buying Canva's transparent PNG images. These images work out to 50% less than those images per image. So if you're looking for additional images to use in your designs, hop over to my Creative Market shop. The link is at the back of the challenge notes, so you can click straight through to them from there. Otherwise, I hope you enjoyed this challenge. Once again, if you have any questions or problems that you need help with, pop them into our DIY designers group. If you're on there, if you're not on there, the link for that is also at the back of the challenge notes. You can send through a join request. Make sure you answer the 3 questions that we ask in order for us to accept your request. And then you can connect with other designers, non-designers, and Vic and myself, and we will help you through your design process. And then we'll see you in the next challenge. Bye. Bye!